Hello everyone, welcome to GGN. This is part 2 for today for Wednesday, August 14th, 2013. I'm Darko and my website is ggnonline.net, and on YouTube my channels are ddarko2012 and ddarko2013. I covered Syria and what's going on in Egypt and some news in Africa with Tunisia and Mali, and now I'll move into some other news including Iran in Asia and Turkey. Turkey denies responsibility for Lebanese pilgrims' abduction. The ambassador to Lebanon wondered how his country could be responsible for the abduction of the Lebanese pilgrims in Syria, saying that Turkey does not even have an embassy or consulate in the neighboring country. Commenting on the kidnapping of 2 Turkish pilots in Lebanon on Friday, the ambassador said the case is in the hands of the Lebanese security and political authorities. Turkish pilot and co-pilot were kidnapped on Friday. Mohammed Salih, a relative of the pilgrims held in Azaz, was arrested on Sunday in connection to the kidnapping. So a well-informed security source told As-Safir he revealed the names of the individuals linked to the abduction. He also said the pilots were kidnapped and hoped to exchange them with the 9 pilgrims. Lastly on the story, caretaker Foreign Minister Adnan Mansour said that Turkey was able to play a major role in helping free the 9 Lebanese hostages held by Syrian rebels since last year. He says, I told one Turkish official in a meeting that no one believes Turkey can do nothing when it controls the situation in northern Syria and supports the opposition. He answered by saying the kidnappers are not under the control of the Syrian opposition, but this is an unconvincing answer. It is unconvincing because it's a blatant lie. I've covered this so much about how Turkey has played a role in aiding and arming the rebels right over the border. So it's just a bunch of crap. Iranian president names female vice president. The law professor joins cabinet consisting of relative moderates and reform-minded Western-educated technocrats. So she's a law and public policy professor at Tehran University and vice president of legal affairs, effectively making her the first woman in the Islamic Republic's history to hold the influential position of vice president. It says here that they'll still have to be officially approved by the Iranian parliament. Then I saw this article right here, so this kind of ties into it. City council are considered too hot and denied seat. This is what the West likes to put out there, because they like to change everybody else that's not like them. This Marathi individual may have upset Islamic conservatives, so too sexy for Iranian politics. 27-year-old candidate won a city council seat, but has been mysteriously disqualified at the last minute, says The Independent. A senior official said that we don't want a catwalk model on the council, but human rights groups argues that she was disqualified due to non-observance of Islamic codes, and notes that her pro-youth campaign posters may have aroused complaints from conservative rivals. I believe it was Tunisia, you had that one feminist that was basically getting naked, and of course it was streamed in Western democratic nations to sympathize with this individual. Well, their own people don't even like what she was doing. Basically, she was acting like a slut and promote feminism, and she was either arrested or stoned or something. I'm not condoning that violence. I'm just saying this is how it is. Different worlds, man. Crew members killed as Indian submarine explodes and sinks at naval dockyard. So this is interesting because we just covered from the 12th and 13th, India launched its first home-built aircraft carrier, and the title of that video was, India militarizing. Then I saw this article, says here, ISRO plans India's spy satellite launch by month's end. More than a dozen sailors on board an Indian Navy submarine are feared dead after it caught fire, exploding and partially sinking at a naval dockyard in Mumbai. Defense Minister of India confirmed that the Navy personnel had died in the explosion. They say it is to be the worst accident for the Navy's submarine fleet since India's 1970 war with Pakistan, which sent a huge fireball into the air and had nearby sailors jumping into the sea in panic. And while we're talking about India, Iranian couple has been mugged and brutally beaten in India and New Delhi. It says it occurred when the 25-year-old and 28-year-old were returning to the residence after shopping. They were on a rickshaw where the driver stopped midway and picked up another person. The 2 men then, in a planned manner, took them in an isolated area, first hitting Sanam with a rod on her head, bleeding profusely as she fainted. Then they attacked her husband and thrashed him badly as he lay unconscious. They were robbed of jewelry they were wearing, as well as newly bought jewelry items worth 600,000 Indian rupees, around $10,000. One commenter said, over 1 billion population and severe poverty, any country would be much worse than India. Imagine if the U.S. was poor as India, how many people would be mugged, raped, and murdered every day. So there's some truth to that. Also, someone said, I was in India last month, and I will never advise anyone to go there ever again. 7-year-old girl raped in train in central India, so in the restroom in the running train in India's central state. Said the 40-year-old man was apparently the friend of the girl's family. PetroChina poised to dominate Iraqi oil. So China's largest oil explorer, right, may join with the United States-based energy giant ExxonMobil Corporation to co-develop the West Kurna oil field in Iraq, which makes up the Chinese company's biggest single foreign investor in Iraq oil industry. On a side note, I've been noticing articles about China deploying troops to Africa and ships, and basically bring out a more militarized presence, probably to secure the resources. On the flip side, so far they're not like the United States, where they just start bombing people and funding terrorism worldwide in order to exploit people's resources. So, in that respect, China doesn't even compare to that U.S. model. But it's worth noting, right? Because then you have this going on with Japan. Japan eyes defending allies under attack. A government panel on security issues will propose that Japan defend not only the United States, but also other allied nations under attack by exercising its right of collective self-defense. So this individual, who serves as the president of International University of Japan, said in an interview that the panel will state in its report that Japan can exercise the right when countries with close ties with it are under attack, and it's deemed to harm Japan. Some experts say Japan should extend the target of its use of collective self-defense to countries including Australia, the Philippines, and India. That's what I think Japan is for the United States. They have kind of a symbiotic relationship, and that's what they'll do. They'll kind of be a little kind of a buffer or counterweight for the West and for China, who, and basically you're talking about international globalist elite that want to run all different countries / corporations, and then of course you're going to have some that are going to want to delve into other people's trading blocks. So yeah, ultimately all the countries are owned, and there is no real sovereignty anymore. That's why you don't really see any big wars anymore. That's what I believe World War I, World War II, among many other wars that were before and after that, but those main ones were there to squash any form of resistance to this global order, financial order. Azerbaijan is to suspend cooperation with the United States and NATO to ensure energy security. So they're talking about Central Asia here in the framework of Putin's visit to the country. They basically coordinated many issues in the military sphere, in particular issues of rather large-scale cooperation between Azerbaijan and Russia during the 22 years of independence. Again, independence, right? They just have a separate bank account, but these countries, Central Asian countries, are being, wooed basically by either Russia, the Russia main power trading bloc, or the United States NATO trading bloc. NATO must go. So it says here that Azerbaijan is committed to purchasing weapons and military equipment from Russia by $4 billion during the next 2 to 3 years. But it's also in energy. It says the state-owned oil companies, the two countries, also agreed on Tuesday to establish a joint venture on a parity basis to produce oil and gas in Russia and Azerbaijan, as well as other countries. Next up, talking about basically Iran and Russia to sign an agreement on building a new nuclear power plant, says the Iranian foreign minister. So Iran has held consultations with the Russian side, and soon an agreement of mutual understanding will be signed on the construction of a new nuclear power plant, says the Iranian foreign minister, which he reiterated is purely peaceful as the country needs nuclear power for electricity generation and medicine. But it's all basically a scam, whether it's used for weapons or not. There's so many ways you can look at it. Well, if they want to have weapons and use it for both, then they should be able to. But then again, it's like, well, they shouldn't even really have to use nuclear weapons when there's alternative forms of energy if they just put the time and energy into it. Moscow says U.S.-Russia ties are... The problem is with that is once you start having countries and communities that have their own alternative forms of energy, then they become sovereign. Then they don't need them anymore, the global elites. Then they can tell them to go screw off, or the British say bugger off, and they don't make money off of them. So Moscow says U.S.-Russia ties are too important to pause. Again, this has to do with money and trade. A senior Kremlin official has described U.S.-Russian relations as too important to hold off following the American president's call for a pause in the ties. U.S. plans to buy weapons from former KGB agent who also arms Syria's Assad. So I don't know if this is disinfo or what, but so it says, if this isn't absurd, I don't know what is. The Atlantic today ran a post detailing how arms deals with Russia to supply Afghans with helicopters that they can't even use not only tie the Russian defense industry to continued influence over the Afghan government, but also inadvertently support a former KGB agent's efforts to arm Assad's government. In fact, the arms dealer is trying to supply Syria with the S-300 surface-to-air missiles, the same ones that Israel warned could take down one of their airliners. They said this type of absurdity happened more recently when the U.S. okayed Qatar and Saudi Arabia in 2011 to arm the Libyan rebels, again, or terrorists. Verify right here. Shortly after, in 2012, the author of New York Times wrote about how Washington freaked out upon realizing those weapons were actually getting in the hands of radical jihadist terrorists. Gazprom's oil arm signed strategic deal with Halliburton. Gazprom Neft, the oil arm of Russia's state-owned gas monopoly, has signed a strategic cooperation agreement with the U.S. energy service giant Halliburton to facilitate technological exchanges that will help increase production, the Russian company said. Want to get to know the ways in which Halliburton uses its technology. Some of the most important topics will concern work with tight oil reserves, unconventional resources, maybe fracking and deep water drilling on the horizon. So it's the latest development in a close relationship between the two gas monopolies' international arm, and in May last year, it says here Halliburton won a $95 million tender from Gazprom. It says here to complete 12 wells drilled by the company in Iraq. We're just talking about China too. Finishing up here, a quadrillion yen and counting. The Japanese debt bomb could set off global panic at any moment. So there's a lot of zeros. Well, a quadrillion yen is worth approximately $10.5 trillion. It's the amount of money that is larger than the economies of Germany, France, and the UK combined. The government debt to GDP ratio in Japan will reach 247% this year, and the Japanese currently spend about 50% of all central government tax revenue on debt service. The two solutions or possibilities are either they default or they try to inflate the debt away, which, again, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with this because I know Chota Boy knows all about circulatory deflation, and he could probably explain it better on the comment board than me. Here's just one from a week ago. All taxes today go straight into the bank's coffers to pay an artificial debt, federal and state debt that mathematically is impossible to pay down. This is contrary to the lie that taxes pay for roads infrastructure is perpetual reinflation that pays for all public infrastructure so that you can physically go out and basically work it off. And earn it. It says pay taxes and then pay a phony loan so the bank can steal it all over again on top of the new money you have created. Venezuelan inflation reaches all-time high. So they reached an all-time high of 29%. In an effort to curb backsliding economy, Maduro has been trying to encourage private businesses. It goes on here, it says it's been a problem in the past as the government's reputation for expropriation once a business becomes profitable, yet while prices rise at an annual average of 49%, wages remain frozen for the majority. This has left the lower classes, Chavismo's socialism bastion of support, with an ever higher cost of living that may say they can no longer afford. Venezuela's economy is based largely on oil, with exports accounting for 95% of its total exports earnings. Talking about protests, in Brazil, they're heating up again. Anti-corruption protest descends into violence with Rio police. So please join me in part 3. This is GGN. I'm Darko. Thank you.